Hey, fifth grade. I miss you guys so much. I really wish we could be in class having fun and learning right now. But I am thankful that we can be together all, even if it's just virtual. So this is our reading video. Couple of things. First, you do still have your reading log, so please make sure that you complete that. You can use your open court story as what you're doing your log on. Okay. The other thing is that today we are starting a new story. It's called Alejandro's Gift. So I'm going to be reading it to you in this video, and I'm going to stop and ask some props. So I want you guys to just think about the story, envision it, and just kind of picture it and think about everything I'm going to be asking and talking about, okay? And then you guys will read it later. Additionally, there are no more reading group things. There's no more stories. You're not doing reading comprehension right now, all of that. So right now, all you're focusing on is your reading log and your open court, okay? So let's get started. Alejandro's Gift. So I'm going to be looking down, by the way, because I'm reading. Alejandro's small adobe house stood beside a lonely desert road. Beside the house stood a well and a windmill to pump water from the well. Water for Alejandro and for his only companion, a burro. It was a lonely place, and Alejandro welcomed any who stopped by to refresh themselves at the well. But visitors were few, and after they left, Alejandro felt lonelier than before. To more easily endure the lonely hours, Alejandro planted a garden filled with carrots, beans, and large brown onions, tomatoes and corn, melons, squash, and small red peppers. Most mornings found Alejandro tending the garden, watching it grow. These were times he cherished, and he often stayed for hours, working until driven indoors by the desert heat. The days went by, one after another, with little change, until one morning there was an unexpected visitor. So we're going to pause. Think in your head, can you make a prediction of who the visitor is going to be? Remember to consider what has come before as you make your predictions about what's going to happen next. Okay, so think about who do you think it's going to be. This visitor came not from the desert road, but from the desert itself. A ground squirrel crept from the underbrush. Moving warily over the sand, it hesitated and looked around. So we can already see that our prediction of who wasn't actually confirmed. It was actually an animal that visited Alejandro. So we're going to keep making predictions as we go. You guys are going to write down your predictions and any questions you have. You don't have to, but I think it's fun to kind of track that kind of thing, okay? Alejandro paused, keeping very quiet as the squirrel approached the garden. It ran up to one of the furrows, drank its fill of water, and scampered away. After it left, Alejandro realized that for those few moments his loneliness had been all but forgotten. And because he felt less lonely, Alejandro found himself hoping the squirrel would come again. The squirrel did come again, from time to time bringing along small friends. Wood rats and pocket gophers, jackrabbits, kangaroo rabbits, and pocket mice. Birds, too, became aware of Alejandro's garden. Roadrunners, Gila woodpeckers, thrashers, cactus wrens, sage sparrows, mourning doves, and others came in the evening to perch on the branches of a mesquite bush or to rest on the arms of a lone saguaro before dropping down for a quick drink before nightfall. Occasionally, even an old desert tortoise could be seen plodding toward the garden. Suddenly, Alejandro found that the time was passing more quickly. He was rarely lonely. He had only to look up from his hoe or from wherever he might be at any moment to find a small friend nearby. For a while, this was all that mattered to Alejandro, but after a time, he wasn't so sure. He began asking himself if there was something more important than just making himself less lonely. It took Alejandro little time to see that there was. He began to realize that his tiny desert friends came to his garden not for company, but for water. And he found himself thinking of other animals in the desert. So, predicting helps you stay actively engaged in the text. So as you come up with predictions, write them down, text me, whatever. Just if you want to let me know the predictions that you've had and whether or not they were confirmed, please do so. I'd love to hear them. Going back to the text. Animals like the coyote and the desert gray fox, the bobcats, the skunks, the badgers, and the long-nosed coatus. The peccaries, sometimes called javelinas, the short-tempered wild pigs of the desert, the antlered mule deer, the does, and the fawns. Finding enough water was not a problem. With his windmill and well, Alejandro could supply ample water for any and all. Getting it to those who needed it was something else. The something else, Alejandro decided, was a desert water hole. Without delay, Alejandro started digging. It was tiring work, taking many days in the hot desert sun. But the thought of giving water to so many thirsty desert dwellers more than made up for the drudgery. And when it was filled, Alejandro was pleased with the gift he had made for his desert friends. There was good reason to suppose that it would take time for the larger animals to discover their new source of water, so Alejandro was patient. He went about as usual, feeding his burro, tending the garden, and doing countless other chores. Days passed and nothing happened. Still, Alejandro was confident, but the days turned to weeks, and it was still quiet at the waterhole. Why, Alejandro wondered, weren't they coming? What could he have done wrong? The absence of the desert folk might have remained a mystery had Alejandro not come out of the house one morning when a skunk was in the clearing beyond the waterhole. Seeing Alejandro, the skunk darted to safety in the underbrush. It suddenly became very clear why Alejandro's gift was being shunned. Alejandro couldn't believe that he had been so thoughtless, but what was important now was to put things right as quickly as possible. So, pausing. Good readers ask themselves questions as they read. What questions have you had so far or are you coming up with? So as you have questions, especially because you will be tested on this later, please let me know any questions that you have that weren't necessarily answered either by you listening or by you reading, okay? Waterhole number 2 was built far from the house and screened by heavy desert growth. When it was filled and ready, Alejandro waited with mixed emotions. He was hopeful, yet he couldn't forget what happened the first time. As it turned out, he was not disappointed. The animals of the desert did come, each as it made its own discovery. Because the waterhole was now sheltered from the small adobe house and the desert road, the animals were no longer fearful. And although Alejandro could not see through the desert growth surrounding the waterhole, he had ways of knowing it was no longer being shunned. By the twitter of birds gathering at dusk, by the rustling of mesquite in the quiet desert evening telling the approach of a coyote, a badger, or maybe a desert fox. By the soft hoofbeats of a mule deer, or the unmistakable sound of a herd of peccaries charging toward the waterhole. And in these moments when Alejandro sat quietly listening to the sound of his desert neighbors, he knew that the gift was not so much a gift that he had given, but a gift he had received. All right, and then you have 2 more pages of reading about the animals and the plants that were talked about in the story. Please, please, please make sure you read those. And then you just have to do the vocab words for today, which are written out on your sheet. Use the glossary, write the definitions that you're preparing for next week's quiz, okay?